Hi, my name is Jackie Harounian, and today I'm presenting on a very interesting topic, at least interesting to me. It's based on a book that I read recently by Amanda Ripley that I really highly recommend. The name of the book is High Conflict. And it really touches on a topic that is very much relevant to family law and psychology. And it has to do with what is unhealthy conflict and what is healthy conflict. What type of conflict can lead to resolution and mediation and negotiation out of court, and which types of family law conflicts are going to lead to entrenched, protracted, very toxic litigation. And it's very important for clients to be aware of their own role in conflict, the history of their relationship in their marriage, in their family relationships that are sort of setting the stage for protracted conflict. Are there mental health issues? Are there some personalities that are really just more primed for intense conflict? And what can you do to understand it, and so that you can make sure that you hire the right professional and engage in a process that's going to lead to eventually resolution. So as in many things with family law, I really ascribe to an 80-20 rule. And for me, that means probably 20% of the conflicts in our firm, we're one of the larger firms in the area that do family law, about 20% of divorces in the country can be labeled high conflict. And in the United States, that's probably 200,000 or more cases per year. And that's just in one country. And you know, that really means a lot of stress on families, a lot of pain, a lot of cost. And it's a very, very destructive type of pain in families. And even for couples that don't go the route of divorce, they spend decades in their marriages, in their relationships, engaged in high conflict. And conflict is the pattern and is the dysfunction in their relationship. I'm gonna go back to my little quick PowerPoint just to tell you a little bit more about me. I am a family law attorney. I'm a partner at Jacqueline Harounian and Associates. We've just moved to Carl Place. So those of you who've seen my little videos, you see that the view behind me is a little bit different. But what makes me unique as a family law professional is that I do have a degree in mental health, in behavioral psychology, and mental health, and really focusing on the emotional and psychological, you know, where our clients are emotionally and psychologically is very much an important starting point when we represent a client. And not only their own issues, but special needs issues of their children, and psychological issues and emotional factors in conflict. And a lot of times with a narcissistic or borderline spouse that is already escalating conflict to the point where it's going to be a problem in the representation. I do think understanding psychology and conflict resolution is critical for a family law attorney. And understanding how people behave in these situations is very, very important. About me, I have always been interested in psychology as part of my practice. And even when I was very young, always had a propensity to be part of resolving conflicts. To looking out for factors that might drive up a conflict and wanting to be part of resolving it or even preventing it. And as a profession, I found a way to witness conflict for a living as a family law attorney. I've always had it in my sight. And I've seen as a divorce attorney how sometimes conflict, prolonged family conflict, really drives people to almost dehumanize the other. A lot of toxic buildup of hatred and animosity, and not understanding the other's point of view. And I've always been fascinated by how some conflicts can be resolved, how some parties will come to me as a mediator, and how others are drawn to years and years of protracted litigation. Sometimes you have control over that, and sometimes, unfortunately, you're in a situation with an ex-spouse where there seem to be accelerants or things inflaming conflict that you don't have control over. But the goal is always to understand it better, to kind of see it coming and find ways to communicate and look for opportunities to resolve conflicts, because even though 20% of cases are high conflict, maybe even more, The reality is 95% or more of cases resolve out of court at some point. They do settle at some point because there simply is not enough resources in the court system to have a judge decide every single case. So there is going to be a settlement at some point. And the question is it going to be in the beginning part, or is it going to be after a year or more? And how much attorney involvement and court involvement is it going to take? So something that's also very true, I'm putting up my screen again, is the truth of this quote that I really, really love. And it has to do with how do we, sorry, I'm putting up the quote right now. What do we do to control the response, our response time? What can we do to buy time and make space in a conflict, and to be more patient, and to be a more active listener, and to take a little bit more of a neutral view of what is going on in your case, whether it's a custody issue, whether it's about the need to sell a house or separate, or agree on issues like child support or complex assets or businesses. What can you do to have a seat at the table and listen, and to make sure that it's a more positive process, and the professionals you hire in a case are really going to influence what type of process you have. Can you sit down with the other side, with the other lawyer, with the law guardian, and listen, and be part of creating a resolution, be part of making suggestions that create a settlement agreement? And when I meet with clients and they're in pain, and a lot of times they've been through a very bad breakup, maybe a betrayal, maybe an infidelity, their defenses are up, and they're not necessarily willing to hear what's going on the other side. It's my job as a family law attorney to help my client feel understood, to understand their unique psychology or what is going on in their family. And when my clients do feel more understood, when they feel like they are being listened to, sometimes they will relax their defenses and be willing to listen a little bit more about what it's going to take to resolve the conflict. Divorce mediation or negotiating directly with the other side, it can be very uncomfortable. It can be very emotional. And what I tell clients sometimes is that confrontation and emotion is not necessarily a bad thing. As long as there's progress being made, as long as there is a common goal of the parties and their counsel to reach a resolution instead of fighting with one another. High conflict, that 20%, that protracted conflict that cannot be resolved easily, it's a psychology where there's a real battle in place that's very entrenched, and the conflict itself is the point. There is no desire to resolve the conflict because both sides are very much caught up in a us, me versus you dynamic, an us versus them. And the brain behaves very, very differently in a situation where there is that protracted conflict. There is no time to sit down and consider resolution. There is a stress response fueled by cortisol in the brain. It's action, reaction, fight, staying up late, planning an attack, being incensed and upset by every interaction with an ex. And it's also true that when you have those cortisol spikes, when you have those stress hormones constantly going off, it's very hard to sit down and consider a custody settlement or consider how to divide up assets. That stress response is going to fuel the conflict day after day, month after month, and sometimes year after year. This type of conflict, it creates a lot of anxiety, it creates a lot of suspicion of your spouse. And as I said before, the conflict is the point. The conflict is what takes over. And the original facts or what went on to build up to the marital dispute almost becomes, fades into the background because the dynamic is what takes over. So how can we slow that down? It is by working with advisors, working with a therapist, trying to organize information, working with your lawyer, and seeing the benefits of listening, the benefits of finding a middle ground, and giving yourself the time to make that happen by communicating different proposals and counter proposals. I have seen that sometimes parties don't want to be the first one to make an offer of settlement. They see that as a sign of weakness. And they're worried that if they make an offer to resolve, let's say based on joint custody, that somehow that means they're going to have to make other concessions in the case. What they don't realize is that sometimes creating a dynamic of active collaboration and reaching a settlement on issues that maybe are a little bit more straightforward sometimes sets the stage to resolve other issues. So I hope you found this interesting. I certainly find the intersection of psychology and law to be very interesting. It's why I've been practicing family law for so many years. I ask anyone who's listening here who's a mental health professional or works in the family law space to consider alternatives to litigation, alternatives to fighting. As I always tell my clients, you don't want to create an enemy. It's very, very important that you internalize this paradigm of co-parenting as best as possible and let go of this idea that in court, you're going to suddenly have an outcome where the court gives you all your rights and takes away rights of your spouse. That almost never happens. It really only happens in a very small minority of cases where, there are real important facts that are in the dispute that are going to determine the outcome. In almost every other case, especially custody matters, there has to be some common ground that's found that's based on the best interests of the child. The same thing when it comes to support issues, which can become very, very entrenched and difficult, and the same thing with division of assets. Understanding the difference between healthy conflict and unhealthy conflict, understanding your own role in escalating a conflict. Are you going back and forth? Are you responding too quickly? Is there name calling? Is there hiding of assets? Is there, being dishonest, trying to prolong the conflict by trying to get an unfair outcome and undermine your spouse? What is your role in the conflict? It's so important that you understand it and take steps to make sure that you are not part of the problem. And listen to your attorneys. I'm going to show you this space. This quote one more time, because I think it's incredibly important if you want to have a successful outcome to any conflict. And right now I'm putting up this last slide so that you can see my contact information at our firm, which has recently moved to Carl Place. We do offer a free consultation. Our attorneys, our mediators are extremely responsive to our clients. And we also have a social worker on staff. We make referrals to other mental health professionals. We want to help customize an outcome for you that is going to be the best possible outcome for you and your family. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need help or you want a free consultation.